Get down!
Resistance 2 begins exactly where Resistance 1 left off. The story in general involves Nathan Hale coming back to the United States and dealing with the Chimera, who have crossed the Atlantic, crossed the Pacific, and are now pummeling the United States. Nathan Hale himself has been brought into a group called the Sentinels. With Resistance 1, it was narrated, and we kind of dissociated the gameplay from the story. I mean, the gameplay definitely follows the story and vice versa, but this time with Resistance 2, we wanted to weave it in a little bit more tightly in terms of having the story take place during the gameplay. So we have, first of all, the game is centered around Nathan Hale. It is all about him, it's from his perspective. And we have a lot of in-game story events happening that help the player understand what's really going on in America in 1953. Another one of our design challenges was introducing very large bosses into the game. Now, bosses are traditionally not found in first-person shooters, mostly because the typical run-and-gun mechanics don't work that well when you have giant bosses on screen. So we said, screw that, let's see if we can add some large bosses, create big spectacle. For example, the Leviathan is 300 foot tall walking through Chicago. Let's do that and help create some real variety in the gameplay and do something that most other first-person shooters don't do. When you boot this up, it has the kind of detail that I think people would expect from a third-generation PlayStation 3 game. We're also doing some really cool stuff specifically with lighting. We've added a lot of really cool techniques in terms of light scattering and dynamic lighting in the levels to make them pop even more. And one of my favorites is our new water. We've got this really cool, fully interactive water with refraction, reflection. It looks very believable. I think all of our games at Insomniac have a stylized quality to them. So we've never gone for photorealism necessarily. We've always gone for, call it hyperrealism, if you will. Something that's a little bit more punchy, something that is more vibrant than reality. And as you can see, we introduced a lot more color with Resistance 2. With multiplayer, we just wanted to break new ground. We wanted to do something that nobody else was doing, and that's why we introduced 8-player online co-op that has its own story, has character progression, has unlockable rewards. It's very deep. At the same time, we wanted to do the same thing with multiplayer competitive modes. So we raised the bar. We have now 60-player battles. Their challenge with both of those modes is to create levels that are fun with a lot of players. Sometimes when you have too many players, things can devolve into utter anarchy, and it's hard to understand what you're supposed to be doing. So we built design devices into both of the modes to ensure that players are directed, they know what they're supposed to do, and they can have fun without getting frustrated. I think Resistance 2 has a lot to offer different types of players. If you're the player who doesn't pay attention to multiplayer and you just like story-driven games, the single-player campaign is very story-driven. If you're a co-op player and you like sitting down with your buddies playing through a story, we've got that too. The 8-player online co-op supports that and does a really good job of creating some very fresh perspectives on co-op in general. If you're a hardcore multiplayer competitive fan, we've got that too. The 60-player online multiplayer competitive will certainly challenge you. It's got plenty of rewards to earn as you move up levels, and it's highly customizable. You don't have to play with 60 players, you can play with 10 players. You can play deathmatch, you can play core control, which is one of our other modes. I mean, there are tons of things you can do in multiplayer. There'll be a lot to keep you busy for a long time. Resistance 2, hitting stores November.